So it was interesting actually today being at Wythenshawe Hospital, for a few hours really. And I mean, one thing I noticed was that um, it was quite chilled. People were quite chilled. I don't know if it's Wythenshawe or what, but people generally seem quite chilled. But maybe it's because they're not having the normal load that they've got to deal with,
Mm.
Um, but I thought of you, and I thought that kind of like monastic lifestyle that you you have in a way, just endless work, work, and then a bit more work after that,
Yeah.
and yeah, but I could sort of get how people do that really, in the NHS, and it just becomes a complete lifestyle, doesn't it?
Oh yeah. I mean, it's especially when you're working from home, everything merges into it. And I started about 8 o'clock this morning. I've just come off the previous call at 5 in order to catch up with yourself. There hasn't been time to have a proper lunch break or anything. You just grab cups of tea and bite to eat when you can.
Yeah.
So I'm looking forward to getting something as an evening meal when I can. Yeah, but it's just, you kind of get used to it in a way, because it's been 12 months of it now. Things are easing in the hospitals because there are less people coming in, but there are psychological consequences for people. The work might have changed in ICU, ITU, and on the COVID wards, and in theatres, but the psychological consequences of what people have gone through and are going through mean that we've got a lot of people that are close to exhaustion / burnout. We've also got people that are struggling because they've either known somebody, a colleague or a relative of theirs has succumbed to COVID, or that they've been required to do things that are really contrary to their own ethics and morals, yet they've been required to do them. And then they struggle with what we refer to as moral injury, which is a psychological condition that people can develop. Plus, because of what people have had to watch and see, and there are members of staff that every single day for weeks, they've lost a patient who's died every day. And that's left some scars for people. And when people that were redeployed have gone back to their normal place of work, then those people that they've come back to being in contact with that were not redeployed, there's some tensions between them. And the people that were not redeployed, either because they weren't deemed to be needed, or they were at home shielding because they couldn't go to work because they've got their own medical, physical conditions, struggling with feeling guilty about not being there to support their colleagues because they couldn't, they weren't able to. So there's a whole range of psychological consequences of the pandemic. So it's kept me busy and will continue, not me personally, because I'm retiring, but keep others busy for quite a while. And then the government doesn't help by saying, you're stars, you're heroes, you're heroines, you're wonderful, you're brilliant, and we'll come out on the streets every day and give you a round of applause, and we'll give you a 1% pay rise. People are furious about that.
Is that like across the board, do you think?
Yeah, it's across the board. It's not just nurses. It's people that are on what's called the agenda for change pay scales, and that's everybody except senior managers and medics.
So, I mean, do you think it's something a bit akin to like like First World War, you know, where people went to war and then the people that stayed at home, they kind of didn't have, there were work going through that same sort of thing. And then there's a bit of a kind of separation between people, you know, like, you know, those who are in the front line and, you know, not quite understood when they come back, or like Vietnam veterans and all that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, there are parallels that you can draw. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it will take a while to, if we ever get back to normality, in inverted commas, in the health service, although for the last 10 years, normality has been, we've been underfinanced, under-resourced, starved of what we needed in order to help people. So one hopes we don't go back to that. But for the time being, because we've got, I forget what it is, but there are over 4 million people waiting for surgery at the moment.
Really? Yeah.
Because all the resources were channeled into COVID patients.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
And I know a number of people that have just had enough, so they've walked. They said, I can't take any more of this. I'm retiring because I can. And in order to recruit people to, to a qualified, experienced place, it takes years.
Yeah, sure.
I mean, if you want to train a consultant, for example, it's going to take between 15 and 20 years to do that.
Yeah.
And whilst people are leaving, it's no good saying, well, we've got all these new training places, we've recruited all these extra nursing places and all these extra doctor places, training places. Actually, there are, you know, we're not even keeping up with the people that are leaving or retiring. So we're in a pretty ropey place, really, the NHS, for all sorts of reasons.
Yeah, yeah.
The one thing that you will notice, though, is that people still manage to retain their compassion. They still manage to remain cheerful and positive. Despite it, it's incredible, really.
I saw that today at the hospital. Yeah, I mean, it's amazing. Yeah, almost like everybody was just like fine, you know. Yeah.
So I'm glad you had a good experience of our healthcare system.
Yeah.
And it's thanks to that, because we've got the healthcare system we've got, that we have done, compared to the rest of the world, so incredibly well in terms of the vaccination program.
Yeah.
It's absolutely remarkable what's been achieved. Every single adult over the age of 50 has now been offered or given the first vaccination.
Yeah.
So it's just amazing when you think that, I don't know what percentage of the population that is, the adult population. It's probably, I don't know what it is, 50, 60% or something. Whatever the percentage is, it compares to somewhere like Japan, which is intent on holding these Olympic Games.
Yeah.
And they've so far managed to vaccinate almost 1% of their population. It's a time bomb. It's just another kind of outbreak, another wave waiting to happen.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's enough whinging on about the NHS. I don't have too much longer to go now.
When are you retiring then?
Well, my official leaving date is June the 7th.
Okay.
But because of time off, the fact that I work part-time, leave that I've accumulated, a little bit of leave that I've carried over, and so on and so forth, it all adds up and means that because I've been working more hours than I should have been, apart from the odd few days in May, my last kind of proper working week will end on April the 30th. So it's just a fortnight tomorrow.
Right.
And then a few odd days here and there. and then that's it.
Right.
But I'm doing stuff anyway. I don't want to leave them in the lurch completely. But I'm retiring from work as a psychologist. But we host things called Schwartz Rounds.
Yeah.
And there's a steering group for that, which I chair, which I won't be doing anymore. I'm also the clinical lead for the trust, which I won't be doing anymore. I'm also a facilitator for the rounds themselves. Now, I'm going to continue doing that for a short time while they get some more facilitators trained up, so that there aren't any gaps. I'm going to continue and expand the work I do as a Buddhist chaplain. And at the moment, I'm just pursuing national recognition of that. And I'm also with the organisation that franchises the Schwartz Rounds out, an organisation called the Point of Care Foundation. I'm going to be taking up a role as a regional mentor for that. So I'll be intending to visit either in reality or virtually different organisations, different trusts, different places like prisons or wherever, where they've got Schwartz Rounds in place for staff.
Yeah.
To kind of mentor them and guide them, help them along the way.
Yeah. Remind me what the Schwartz Round thing is then.
Schwartz Round is an opportunity for staff, all staff, to join together to do something that is a little bit unusual, and it's a space, a protected, safe space, confidential space for people to share how the work that they've been doing has affected them, either at work or personally, or in their relationships and life outside work. And each round has a particular title. And an example of a title might be, one we've run was The Day I Made a Difference. And another one was When I Felt My Best Wasn't Good Enough. So there's a range of different, each has a title, and we've got some panelists. There's 3 or 4 panelists, and the way it's structured is, we've got if it wasn't virtual, if it was in an ordinary room, there'd be a lot of chairs and for people to sit on facing the front. And then at the front, there'd be 3 or 4 panelists in a line or seated. On either side, there's a facilitator. So the facilitators introduce the round, introduce the topic, and then they invite the first panelist to tell their story, which will be 5 or 10 minutes of them speaking about the topic that is the title. So if it was The Day I Felt My Best Wasn't Good Enough, we'll have someone share with everybody else what the experience was they want to describe. Then without any pause, it goes to the next, and then to the next, and to the next, till all the panelists have finished telling their stories while the rest are listening. Then we have a little period of silence while people just think and reflect on what they've heard. Then we open it up to everybody else, if they want to either contribute something from their experience, to say something about what they've heard, how that's made them feel. And we concentrate on people's feelings and emotions. And also we give the panelists an opportunity to address any questions anybody might have. The facilitators are there to protect the panelists and make sure that any inappropriate questions they don't have to deal with, the facilitator deal with them. We make sure that there's nothing to do with problem solving or suggestions as to how somebody might have done something better. We don't have any of that. And then we finally round it off with the panelists being asked for any final thoughts that they might want to share. And it lasts altogether for an hour. So there's quite a lot in it.
Mm.
And normally these group events, they're training events or teaching events or, you know, something like that. And this isn't anything like that. It's just linking with the whole idea of compassionate care, that we get a chance to share with one another aspects of ourselves, really. So that's a Schwartz round.
Yeah. So it's like the panelists are kind of like modeling a certain kind of reflectivity on their, you know, what they've enjoyed in their lives, what in the work, what's gone, or what, you know, what's gone a bit difficult and all that sort of thing. And then,
well, it's not
people
so
there
much,
kind of sort of follow it or something.
it's not so much that they're modeling anything.
Yeah.
They get invited or they volunteer to be a panelist, and you know, another one we did was how it feels to be on the other side, and that was about when a member of staff was a patient.
Yeah.
And their experience, and all they do is just share their experiences. There's no intention to kind of be good at it or model anything in particular.
Well, they've just been, they just know what they know what the subject is basically, and they're talking about it. Yeah.
And they go down very well, actually. We've had, I think we've done about 20 of them now, half of them virtually and half of them in reality, as it were. Yeah. And the people seem to get a lot out of them.
Yeah.
So I'm keen to carry on involvement with that. And the other thing I'll continue to be doing is being involved with breathworks. So that's going to continue.
Yeah, great. Yeah. And what else are you going to do when you retire?
I'm going to decide what I do and when I do it.
Each day. Yeah.
I'm going to decide, unless there's something in the diary, when I get up in the morning, how I'm going to spend the day. It could be taking the dog for a walk. It could be driving somewhere. It might be doing some gardening. It might be just having the opportunity to not be governed by a packed schedule and diary with tasks and jobs that I have to do. So I'm hoping that when they announce things on May the 17th, that we'll be allowed to travel. So I'm going to spend 3 weeks in Corfu and nearby islands, and go have a trip around the Ionians, if that's going to be possible.
Right. Yeah. I mean, do you think there's been some sort of positive changes for people in this through the lockdown? I mean, you know, as Buddhists, we talk about withdrawing from the world and kind of reflecting on our experience a bit more. People have been forced into that in a way, haven't they? You know, so thoughts about that. You know,
I think it's double-edged, really, or two-sided. There are the people that I'm sure will have and have benefited because they've been thrown back more on their own resources, and they've had to be more responsible and more of an individual in order to get through it all. But they've welcomed, a lot of people have welcomed their reconnection with the natural world, with nature. People appreciate walks and they appreciate changes in nature with the birds and the plants, trees and everything else. So there have been some positives, without a doubt. And there's also been a positive. There's been some, I mean, it's overrun by the negatives, but there have been some positive changes in terms of people's health. We've had far less colds over the cold season and things like influenza, and people have just been distancing themselves and not sort of coughing and spluttering over each other. So people have, you know, there's been less infectious disease around apart from COVID. And hopefully that'll be a permanent change. People will see the good sense in washing your hands, blowing your nose, keeping away from people, and not coughing over the next person. So but then there are people that have been really badly affected. I mean, mental health problems amongst people, in particular young people, have rocketed. And the mental health services are overwhelmed because of the adverse mental health effects of not being able to socialize. It doesn't matter to the likes of me whether I socialize or not. You know, I've had my life in terms of wanting to go out partying, but young people, even when they've managed to go to university, they've then been locked up in their accommodation, and it's been horrible. So I think if it had happened a couple of generations ago, it might have been easier. But with the changes in society, the changes in culture, and people, in my opinion, not being anywhere near as resilient as they used to be, they're really struggling now.
Is that because they've got this sort of culture where they're kind of, it's a bit it's like they think everything should be provided for them and that sort of thing? Is that?
Well, there's a bit of that, but it's also to do with we're so comfortable now. I mean, everybody's house has got a waterproof roof, and there's heating, and people have got food to eat. I know about the food banks and everything else, but most ordinary people's ordinary lives, they live in pretty good accommodation, and they've got access to things like television and social media and so on and so forth. Well, you know, we didn't have any of that when I was growing up.
Like what's that television thing from the 70s? What was it called? It was going back to the 70s. There's a David Bowie song, "Life on Mars," was it?
Oh yeah.
You know, it's a bit like that world, you know. Kind of Hard Knocks, wasn't it?
When he was in his Ziggy Stardust phase. I mean, see, I remember as a child when we didn't have a television. I remember when we first got one. And it had this enormous 9-inch screen. And you had a television consisted of BBC, one channel. And then watching things change, where suddenly there was another channel. And broadcasts used to go on all evening. You didn't have interludes. There was nothing to do except look at a test card or watch some goldfish or some kittens playing with a ball of wool. And then eventually we had colour. So instead of having to watch snooker in black and white, you could I remember Ted Lowe used to commentate, and he once said he's going to go for the blue ball now. And for those of you with black and white, the blue ball is next to the brown one. Oh dear.
Well, I remember like watching my first bit of colour telly was I think it was an FA Cup final with Everton, and it might have been West Brom or something. You know, and it was like in the shop window.
People used to gather around shop
kind of
windows.
Blotchy, you know. Like somebody had painted it in with wasn't quite very clear, you know.
Well, every shop that sold televisions, they always used to have a gathering around about 4:30 on a Saturday afternoon, so people could look at the football results. So we've seen lots of, now the point of rambling on about all this is that when you've had something, when you don't have it any longer, you experience a loss, and it's difficult. Whereas if you never had it in the first place, it's not a big issue, is it?
Yeah.
I mean, I can't imagine doing without a car now. But you know, I was 21 before I got a car, and before that, well, just didn't have one. And the reason I can't imagine not having one now is because of all the essential journeys to do with work and to do with things to do with the house and everything. So I'd find it hard not having it. Well, I wouldn't. It wouldn't be that hard. I'd just get public transport or get a taxi. But you know what I mean. If somebody took my mobile phone away and said you can't have a mobile phone anymore, I'd get used to it.
Yeah.
Whereas if you took a mobile phone off a 17 or 18-year-old, they'd get severely depressed.
Yeah. Well, I mean, is there something about like being kind of conscious, like consciously giving something up and not consciously giving it up? So thinking in terms of like me doing a solitary retreat in my flat, you know, like last September, and just turning the phone off, piling on my electronic devices up in a pile, they're all switched off, and just reading books and that, you know. So doing that, consciously doing it, I actually start to experience the joy of just not having to get engaged with all that stuff, you know. But if it's taken away from you when you're not conscious, it's not consciously that you're consciously doing it, then it's sort of a bit different, isn't it? So
oh, very much so. I totally agree.
Practice like deliberately, like doing without or something like that, you know. Yeah.
So it's good for us once in a while, at least, to renounce something, or at least do without something for a period of time.
Yeah. I saw that film Castaway with Tom Hanks, recently, yesterday actually. And you know,
Wilson.
Wilson is volleyball Wilson, you know. And but the way that he just grew into this, well, he was, you know, he's talking to Wilson, his volleyball, you know, but but he kind of really learned to master his environment, didn't he? You know, he just became quite a kind of powerful kind of personality, really, you know.
It's a really good film.
Yeah. So like looking forward to like the future, you know, like for people, for like young people, you know, what can you know, I mean, assuming things, I'm not assuming that things are going to just go back to normal, and you know, there might be some shocks in sight for people, you know, to fight economically and that sort of thing. And have you got any thoughts about that, about how they could deal with that, you know, or how approach it? And
I haven't really given it much thought, except that there's such a lot of kind of doom and gloom in terms of negative forecasting, especially in the area of education,
right,
where people are saying that, you know, people have missed schooling and they've missed college, they've missed university, and they've missed out in so many ways. It's going to blight the rest of their lives. Well, I don't subscribe to that. People catch up.
Well, that's catching up with knowledge, isn't it? It's just knowledge, isn't it? It's not necessarily experience that people can learn from.
And there's lots of different ways that we can acquire information, acquire knowledge. And the biggest thing is learning to think for ourselves, really. Rather than, I mean, that's the part of this negative kind of forecasting is, I think, something to do with the way education systems, in large measure, they spoon feed people now. And it's not that they're, take any lesson really, take physics. You're taught physics in a way now where you're basically learning to pass an exam. You're not learning it because there's a desire and a need to impart knowledge and information. It's about getting somebody through the exam. And I think that there might actually be some positive consequences out of all this, because we learn that we can, what we will learn is that we can still acquire knowledge, information, and still have job prospects without necessarily having to go to school 5 days a week for year after year after year without any interruption.
You mean like lockdown sort of thing?
Yeah. I mean, people are saying, well, they've missed a whole year of education. They haven't. They've missed a year of being at school. And young people are remarkably adept at being able to adapt to things. They far more easily can adapt to things than the likes of me. And I would think that there's going to be shifts and changes in the economy going forwards. Of course there will be, but probably the consequences of what we've gone through with the pandemic are not going to be they're not going to be significantly greater than other world changes anyway, like climate change, like reorganization of national and international ways of cooperating and collaborating. Brexit is just the start of it. It's not an end point. It's going to redefine not just our relationship with Europe, but it's going to redefine how people organize things like trade agreements and how people travel about and exchange information. Working from home has been remarkable. 2 years ago, if you'd said, well, we want people to work from home, there would have been so much resistance, because people would have assumed, well, you can't trust people to work from home. They've got to be here. I've got to be able to see them, got to be able to monitor them, check them, supervise them. And the experience of people working from home is it can be made to work really well. And there are pluses. I'm not saying everybody should work from home, or that somebody working from home should have to do that 5 days a week. But when you are working from home, you don't have to travel. So you're not wasting time. You're not wasting the planet's resources with fuel and everything else. You're not creating traffic jams. You're not plugging up the atmosphere with all the waste emissions from the vehicles. And you can have a break when you want to. You can organize your own day better. And productivity in a lot of areas has risen with people working from home. Not fallen. GPs would have told you it's not possible to have anything other than a face-to-face consultation. It can't be done. And yet for 12 months they've now been doing it, and doing it successfully. So I think there's going to be some really positive changes and opportunities for younger people as well, opportunities for people to see niche areas and to see opportunities in the marketplace they'll be able to take advantage of, because they can flex and they can be adaptable and they can change. So I'm not I'm not one of these sort of pessimists in life. I think there's every reason to be optimistic for the longer term future of young people.
I've been really struck by I mean, like, go back 5 years ago, I thought like Elon Musk was kind of a bit of a head case, really. Kind of on this mission to make electric cars, and and against all the oil companies and all that sort of stuff. And I thought, there's no way he's going to do that, Like now, he's launching this kind of colonization of Mars project, And it's got a certain amount of credibility around it, He's just thinking clear. So he's just thinking it through, You have a certain amount of, you keep doing things, you fail, and eventually you hone things until they work, and yeah, and
Well,
now
look at the
everyone's
consequences.
believing in him now, you know.
Look at the consequences of what he set out to do. Every major car company in the world is now producing at least hybrid, if not full electric road vehicles.
Yeah.
And there's legislation in place now in countries like the United Kingdom that make it unlawful to produce non-electric vehicles after a certain date.
Yeah.
And his company, Tesla cars, are the finest examples of electric vehicles around. They are absolutely astonishing.
Yeah.
Their acceleration, for example, it's mind-boggling.
Yeah.
You know, a decent road car will get from 0 to 60 in, I don't know, maybe 8 seconds. But an electric vehicle that he produces, he'll get from 0 to 60 in about 2 seconds. It's absolutely remarkable.
Yeah.
And we've got Formula E racing now, haven't we?
Oh, is there? I don't know.
Yeah,
that.
we've got racing cars. There's Formula One and Formula 3 and Formula Ford. There's Formula E now. So you've got electric racing cars, and they're regular events, and some big names are actually driving in these events.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, he had a big part to play in it, Elon Musk, didn't he?
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Yeah, he's got his eyes set on Mars.
Yeah. I mean, watching those rockets land, it was just amazing. You know, 2 of them at the same time.
Yeah.
On the thing in the middle of the ocean, you know, the platform in the middle of the ocean.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, yeah, in the future, people won't be going on river cruises. They'll be going on space trips.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you fancy a couple of days on the moon?
Yeah.
They're restarting the programs to get back to the moon again now, aren't they?
Well, it's funny because they, you know, Elon Musk was like visibly affected when somebody told him that Neil Armstrong was disappointed with what he was doing. He actually started crying a bit, you know. Like,
yeah.
Yeah. But you just kind of wonder what's going on there, really. You know. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the other thing for me with all that, you know, you got sort of technological developments and stuff like that, but there's always still the whole thing of distribution, you know, of wealth and all that sort of thing. So it's like, you know, are people turning their attention to things that are just going to affect the masses of people rather than, you know, maybe kind of space travel or something like that, you know. Yeah. So yeah. Have you got any thoughts about
that? Well, I haven't given it any thought.
Yeah.
Maybe you could share what yours are.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I mean, I think people do get excited by technology and all that sort of thing, and well, around the world, you know, even in India, you know, it's like people are kind of interested in iPhones and stuff like all that, aren't they? You know. But I think there's a certain way in which I don't know. I saw that film Arrival last night. You know, where the alien, with these big alien, and it's all about this different language that the aliens are trying to teach the humans about cooperation and stuff. You know. So I think there's a way to go really with all of that, you know, that people need to sort of realize that it's not about expecting your politicians to sort everything out, you know, but there's got to be a way in which on an individual level that we're all trying to bear each other in mind and, you know, not just go for the sort of self-serving kind of option really, you know. Yeah.
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 Well, maybe there'll be a little bit more emphasis, and maybe some countries might take a bit more of a lead from Bhutan, and maybe we'll be a bit more interested in gross national happiness rather than gross domestic product.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think we'd all benefit from a little bit more emphasis on that, and less emphasis on just making shed loads of money.
Yeah.
And I think perhaps there'll be opportunities, positive ones, that are spin-offs from technological advances that will enable us, who knows, to connect in a more compassionate way. There are drivers against that, and it's difficult to see at the moment with the negative aspects of instant access to information and instant access in terms of communication with many people.
Yeah.
There's so much positive. There are so many positives that have come out of the fact that we can all communicate with each other quickly and easily via technology.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, there's a dark side to all that as well, isn't there? And nobody's really managed to come up with workable ideas as to how we better manage that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's like
I stay optimistic. I remain optimistic about it, that the good will outweigh. I've always liked a good cowboy film where, you know, the good guy wins. I'm a sucker for, you know, good triumphing over evil in whatever kind of way it's portrayed.
Yeah.
It's a mainstay of what I fundamentally believe, really, and that's that ultimately, however difficult it might seem at times, and how much evidence there is to the contrary, ultimately we live in some kind of just universe. I'm not saying it's fair, but I believe that ultimately there is some kind of justice, which links in with ideas about karma and karma vipaka and you know, the whole area of rebecoming and so on.
Yeah. I mean, I think like we're thinking about technology and like ethics and stuff. It's like technology help the internet and everything just helps technology kind of burn forward much more quickly, doesn't it? Because everyone can access everybody's information all the time. You know, so it's like it just boom, 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 you know. But actually, maybe what needs to happen with in the ethical world is that people need to actually do the opposite and just slow down, you know, and actually think about things, you know, slow down and think about the consequences of this or that, or this of saying this on this social media platform, or, you know, it's like, so it does seem like there's been a shift over towards people having kind of long form conversations that just kind of that go into detail a bit more, and, you know, get down to the details of things, and that's more like what wisdom is, really, isn't it? It's like it's a sort of an ability to take in all the different factors in a situation and make a decision that's actually a wise decision about, oh, this is probably the best way to go forward. So but this whole thing about people having echo chambers, that they're just hearing what they know, what they think, you know, back and all that. We need to move away from that and towards whatever the opposite of an echo chamber is, you know, where people are hearing what they don't think back, you know. And so that's what I want to do with the discussion things I'm interested in doing.
There's a couple of points about that, and that's people need to learn how to think more effectively and to think more effectively for themselves. And in order to help people learn how to think, they have to have an appreciation of an alternative point of view about something. So people need to be able to listen to what somebody else is saying and not condemn what's being said because they don't agree with it, or to condemn it because they don't like the person that's saying it. They need to be able to listen to opinions and views, ideas and thoughts, and then appraise them and think about them for themselves without being affected by what their pal thinks or whoever it is that's the speaker. So we need to learn how to think more effectively. That's one thing. The other thing is we need to know what we ought to be thinking about. And we don't necessarily know what the issues that we really should be spending some time attending to unless we have that information. And that's where mass communication and the ability to hear and see what's happening in the world easily, readily, and quickly comes in. So we wouldn't be considering the dreadful things we're doing to the planet with the association with climate change and the imperative need to do something about it if it wasn't for mass communication. We wouldn't know that we were wrecking the planet unless that information was communicated and we could see what was happening. We could see what the scientists and the technology can show us. So we need to know how to think, and we need to know what to think about. And that's the upside of modern technologically available communication systems for us all.
Yeah. I mean, one thing that struck me a bit in the during the lockdown has been this almost and I'm sure this is going to come out in the wash, basically, you know. So when something happens that you think that doesn't seem quite right, you know, that it does come out in the, you know, like 10 years later, somebody analyze it, you know, it comes out and people realize what's happened, you know. So there is this thing of which is a bit weird, really, and it's like in the scientific community, you know, in the medical community, you've got people saying here's the evidence for this and all that sort of thing, and then you've got somebody else saying, oh, here's the evidence, and it's like it's almost like they're not quite talking to each other, there's become a little bit of a sort of distrust of like of the medical science, you know, almost like is it being influenced by politics or interest groups or whatever it is, you know. Have you got any thoughts about that, or you know?
Well, I think the answer as to whether scientific research and medical research and scientific opinion, medical opinion, is influenced by political questions and politics. The answer is undoubtedly yes, of course. I would argue that science on which medicine is based, medicine is not a science in itself. Medicine rests on science, but it isn't a science in its own right. But science, the basic fundamental sciences, the STEM subjects, they're pure. What isn't pure is the people that are actually engaged with them.
Yeah.
So whilst physics might be pure, it doesn't mean that a physicist is pure, because the physicist and whatever you are as a scientist, in order to operate in the world, you probably need research funding. And how are you going to get research funding? Well, you're going to get it if you can make a successful bid to win funds from some vested interest or other.
Yeah.
That's a significantly problematic issue.
Yeah.
And you get people working in an area. Scientists are no less competitive than anyone else in the world.
Yeah.
Of course, they collaborate and cooperate, but they also they want to progress their career. They want to get up the greasy pole, you know. They want to hold a chair somewhere, for instance. And so they produce something that perhaps is a theory and they set about testing it and they get some research data and so on. Somebody else might be working in a similar or the same field and they produce evidence that is contrary in one way or another. So there's a debate, and somebody's got to make a decision about which scientific advice to go with when it's conflicting. And who makes those decisions? Politicians. So I don't need to say any more, really. The evidence is all around us, exemplified by the sometimes absolutely first-class, excellent decisions that have been made regarding COVID-19, and some utterly dreadful, appalling decisions that have been made by politicians.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the thing that's in my mind more recently is that guy John Campbell, you know, the retired nurse who does lots of. He's got almost 1 million followers on YouTube, and he just presents a lot of evidence all the time, you know, for things. And he was interviewing somebody about the World Health Organization had done this study on ivermectin, and the result was that it was 70% effective against COVID-19, you know, but we weren't going to recommend it, you know, for X reason and stuff like that. So, and it was like him and the professor he was interviewing were like, well, what the hell is going on here, you know? So, but, you know, there's been some suspicion that World Health Organization is kind of a little bit influenced by China and stuff like that. And, you know, I don't know. So, but well, it felt like that thing where somebody's presenting something, you know, and you just know it's wrong. You just know it's suspect, you know. It's a kind of it's a blag or something, you know. But I mean, do you think that people? I mean, the problem is like people just go along with that, don't they? Or they tend to, you know, think, oh, I can't make my own. I can't just decide for myself to take some ivermectin or something like that, you know.
People are always going to be influenced by what they think is reasonable, sensible information. Most people are conservative with a small c and cautious about what they do.
Yeah.
Mostly people are pretty cautious about what they want put into their bodies, for example.
Yeah.
But we do see a lot of emphasis. I think we're all a bit like this. We tend to home in on unusual events, unusual situations, and we pay more attention to them than the norm, as it were. So people are influenced when they see that it's possible to win tens of millions of pounds on the lottery. So they'll buy a lottery ticket. Not really paying the right amount of attention to the fact that you might as well stand over a drain and drop money down the drain when you buy a lottery ticket, because there is a chance it might be me. I might have the winning one. There's even a program on television at the moment called The Syndicate, which is about that very thing. But because we tend to pay more attention, undue attention to rare things, this has led to the situation where I think it's the Netherlands that have just stopped using AstraZeneca vaccine altogether. And certainly it's been restricted in most European countries on the basis of there being a risk of blood clots. Now, when you look at the statistics, the chances of you...
Like 1 in a million or something.
It's not even that. If we make comparisons, the chances of you getting a blood clot that is a significant and problematic blood clot because of the AstraZeneca virus, the AstraZeneca vaccination, is broadly equivalent to an aeroplane landing on your house, or it's more than 100 times less likely that you'll get a blood clot than if you take the contraceptive pill. So we can make all sorts of comparisons to try to put things into context. And when you've got 6 deaths out of millions of vaccine administrations, you kind of wonder why it's being played in the way that it is. When we know that if you don't vaccinate people, you'll get far more people dying from COVID.
Yeah.
So we're not always very logical or very rational about the way we process data and information.
Yeah. And well, I've just thought that I've faced so much of this sort of stuff over the last year, seeing that this sort of thinking around, you know, that I found it just really frustrating, you know, to, you know, can't they just weigh things, you know, like, you know, it's a very small possibility of this happening. But do you think it's to do with like kind of people just want to protect themselves, you know, professionally? Nobody wants to make a mistake, you know, and then get sued or something, you know. So people,
I'd be speculating. I'd be going into speculative politics now. I really don't want to suggest for one moment that politicians in mainland Europe are covering their tracks because of the appalling way that they didn't prepare and didn't buy vaccines and didn't use them properly. So I certainly don't want to be drawn into that.
No. Or even mention it.